Thomas Avery had been a royal guard for many years, and people from all over the world came to see him without even knowing his name. To most visitors, he looked like a tall, perfectly still figure in a bright uniform, someone who did not blink, smile, or move. But behind the uniform was a real man, with real thoughts, memories, and a quiet heart that noticed everything around him. Even though he stood like a statue, he was aware of every footstep, every laugh, every whisper from the visitors who gathered near the gates of Buckingham Palace. Every morning, Thomas arrived before the sun fully rose. The palace grounds were calm at that hour, with the air cool and peaceful. As he put on his uniform, he always made sure every detail was in the right place. The polished shoes, the bright buttons, the tall bearskin hat, the perfectly straight posture. These were not just rules for him. They were part of a duty he respected deeply. To Thomas, being a royal guard was more than a job. It was a way to show honor, discipline, and care for the people who trusted him to protect a historic place. When his shift began, he would march to his post with steady steps that echoed softly on the stone path. Once he reached his position, he would stop firmly and become still. From that moment on, he stayed alert but motionless, no matter how long the shift felt. Tourists loved taking photos of him, trying to make him laugh, or testing if he would react. Some waved their hands in front of him, some made silly faces, others whispered jokes, hoping to break his seriousness. But Thomas never reacted, not even a tiny smile. His calm expression never changed, and people admired his self-control. Yet while he looked unshakable, Thomas always showed silent kindness in small ways. He kept his eyes focused forward, but he noticed little things. He noticed when someone dropped their map and struggled to pick it up. He noticed when a family gathered close together, trying to capture a perfect photo. He noticed children holding their parents' hands and staring at him with wide eyes full of wonder. And even though he could not speak or step out of line, those small human moments warmed him from within. One thing that made Thomas truly stand out among the guards was the peaceful energy he carried. Visitors often felt calm just by standing near him. They would comment that he looked so steady, like a pillar rooted firmly in the earth. Some said his presence made them feel safe. Others said watching him made them reflect on patience and discipline. Thomas never heard these compliments directly, of course, but he sensed the admiration in people's expressions. Many people did not know that standing still for hours was difficult work. Thomas had to ignore tired legs, the urge to scratch an itch, the heat of the sun, or sudden shifts in weather. Rain, wind, cold, or bright sunshine, none of it changed his posture. Even on long days, when crowds grew large and noisy, he kept his focus. He had trained for years to master this ability. He learned how to breathe evenly, how to keep his muscles firm but not tense, and how to stay aware without reacting. And he took quiet pride in doing it well. Children were his favorite visitors to watch. They brought energy to the palace grounds. Some would run up eagerly, excited to see a real soldier. Others were shy and stood behind their parents, peeking out with curious eyes. Many children believed that royal guards were magical because they never moved. Parents often told them, "Look, he's like a superhero who doesn't speak." That made Thomas smile on the inside. He enjoyed being part of a memory that children would keep for years. Sometimes, school groups visited. Dozens of students would gather in front of him, their teachers trying to keep them organized. The teachers explained the history of the guards, the meaning of the uniform, and the importance of the role. Thomas listened silently, standing tall as the children watched him with fascination. He always hoped that his discipline might inspire them, even in a small way. Despite all the attention, Thomas never felt the need for applause or praise. He believed that true service was about quiet responsibility. His father had taught him that when he was young, "A good person does the right thing even when nobody notices," his father used to say. Those words stayed with Thomas throughout his life. Every time he stood at his post, he remembered them. Thomas had his own personal routines that helped him stay focused. Before each shift, he would take a deep breath, clear his mind, and think of something peaceful. Sometimes he pictured the calm waves of the seaside where he grew up. Other times he thought of his younger sister, who always told him she believed he could do anything. Even though she had passed away when they were much younger, her memory stayed close to his heart. He never shared this with anyone, but it was one of the reasons he tried to be gentle and understanding, especially toward children who visited. Tourists often wondered how he could remain so steady. Some guessed it was due to strict rules. Some thought it was pure physical strength. And some believed he had an extraordinary level of patience. In truth, it was a combination of all these things, and something more, a sense of purpose. Thomas knew that every day he stood in that uniform, he was part of a tradition that had lasted for hundreds of years. He respected that deeply. On most days, visitors simply took photos and moved along. But sometimes, rare moments happened. Moments that reminded Thomas of the human connection hidden beneath the formal duty. He never broke the rules, but he found ways to show warmth through the smallest gestures. A steady presence, a calm expression, a soft focus of the eyes. People often felt touched by these tiny moments, even if they could not explain why. There were days when Thomas felt tired, or when his thoughts drifted to personal worries. But the moment he stood at his post, those thoughts softened. His role required him to be centered. And strangely, serving others helped him maintain that balance. It reminded him that every person who walked past was carrying their own stories, their own joys, worries, and hopes. Even though he could not speak to them, he felt connected to them in a quiet way. Sometimes he felt the weight of the uniform, not physically but emotionally. It symbolized honor and responsibility, and he wanted to live up to it. When people looked at him with admiration, he felt proud but humble. He never wanted to disappoint anyone who saw him as a role model, especially children. That thought alone encouraged him to stand tall, even on difficult days. And so, Thomas continued his duty, day after day, appearing unshakable to everyone who saw him. Yet, behind the stillness, was a man with a kind heart and a deep sense of purpose. He believed that even the smallest gestures, ones too gentle for most to notice, could touch someone's heart. He never tried to draw attention to himself, but rather to the meaning of his role. What he did not know was that one ordinary day would soon become unforgettable. A day when a small, shy girl, wearing a toy crown, would walk toward him with wide, hopeful eyes. A day when his quiet kindness, normally hidden behind a uniform, would reach someone in a way he never expected. And that simple moment would make strangers watching from afar tear up and remember it for years. The day Emily arrived at Buckingham Palace began like any other for Thomas, yet something in the air felt a little different. The sun was gentle, the sky was clear, and the early morning visitors wandered calmly through the palace grounds. Thomas marched to his post with steady steps, prepared for another long shift of standing still and showing the dignity expected of a royal guard. He had no idea that a small moment was waiting for him, one that would touch the hearts of many people. Far from Thomas's thoughts, a young girl named Emily walked hand in hand with her parents toward the palace. She wore a tiny plastic crown, the kind one might find in a toy store, shining softly under the sunlight. It was a little too big for her head, slipping sideways every few minutes. But she loved it. It made her feel brave. And today, she needed that courage more than usual. Her parents kept glancing down at her with gentle smiles, encouraging her with quiet words. Emily had recently gone through weeks of hospital visits. She often felt scared and tired, and even though the doctors and nurses were kind, the whole experience had made her nervous about crowded places and unfamiliar faces. Coming to London was her parents' way of helping her feel adventurous again. They told her she could choose one special place to visit on this trip. And she chose Buckingham Palace because she dreamed of seeing a real royal guard, someone strong, brave, and steady. As they got closer, Emily slowed down, her steps tiny and hesitant. She held her mother's hand tighter and looked up at the tall palace gates. She had seen photos of the guards before, standing straight with their bright uniforms and tall hats, but seeing one in real life was different. It made her heart beat fast with excitement, but also a little fear. Would the guard be kind? Would he let her stand near him? She wasn't sure. Her father noticed her nervousness and bent down to her level. "Remember," he said softly, "you don't have to say anything. You can just look. He's there to help protect everyone. And he won't be upset if you feel shy." She nodded, touching the edge of her toy crown for comfort. She wanted to be brave like the guards she saw in videos. She had imagined this moment many times, standing in front of a real royal guard and feeling safe because he was so strong and calm. Thomas stood still at his post, unaware of the little girl approaching. His eyes faced forward, focused on the open space ahead. Visitors were coming and going in their usual patterns. Some posed for photos. Some laughed as they tried to mimic his posture. Thomas remained motionless, letting the crowd become a soft background noise. Then he noticed something small in the corner of his vision, a little flicker of movement lower than the adults. His eyes did not move, but he was trained to sense changes around him. A tiny figure with a shiny toy crown stepped closer, holding her parents' hands tightly. Even in his stillness, Thomas felt a gentle shift in the atmosphere. Children often had that effect. They brought a kind of freshness to the surroundings. Emily's parents guided her until they stood a few steps away from the guard. Emily looked up slowly, her eyes wide and sparkling with both awe and uncertainty. Thomas towered above her, completely still, his posture perfect and unchanging. To Emily, he looked like a strong, silent hero from one of her storybooks. Her father whispered, "It's okay. You can stand closer if you want." Emily took a small step forward, then stopped. She glanced at Thomas's uniform, noticing every detail: the dark buttons, the gleaming rifle resting beside him, the bright red coat, and the tall hat that made him look even more impressive. She had never seen anyone stand so straight before. He didn't sway, didn't blink, didn't shift his weight. He seemed like a living statue. Her mother knelt beside her and said gently, "If you feel too shy, you don't have to go any closer." Emily shook her head. She wanted to be brave. She took another step. Thomas, without breaking posture or expression, let his eyes soften just slightly. Not enough to break the rules, but enough to let her know he noticed her. Kids often looked at him with wonder. But something about this little girl felt different. Maybe it was the crown, slightly crooked. Maybe it was the shy determination in her steps. Or maybe it was simply the quiet hope shining in her eyes. Visitors around them began to notice the scene. A few stepped aside, giving the family room. They saw the tiny girl in the toy crown walking carefully toward the tall guard, and many paused with gentle smiles. People loved moments like this, simple, sweet, and full of innocence. Emily finally stood right in front of Thomas. She tilted her head back, looking up at him like he was the tallest person in the world. Her toy crown slipped sideways again, and her mother reached over to fix it for her. Emily giggled softly, and the sound made Thomas's chest warm, even though his expression didn't change. Her father whispered to Thomas, knowing the guard could not respond, "She's been wanting to see a guard for so long. She's been very brave recently, even when things were scary for her." Thomas could not reply, but he listened closely. He felt a gentle respect for the little girl. Children who went through difficult times often carried a strength that adults sometimes overlooked. The idea that Emily saw him as someone who represented bravery touched him deeply. Emily took another deep breath. She lifted her chin and tried to copy his posture. She straightened her back, held her arms stiff at her sides, and tried to keep her face serious. She wobbled a little, her legs not steady enough to stand still for long, but she tried anyway. People nearby noticed and smiled. A few quietly lifted their phones to take photos, but they did so respectfully, not wanting to disrupt the sweet moment. Emily stood as still as she could for several seconds. Then she whispered to her mother, "Is he watching me?" Her mother smiled. "He sees everything, sweetheart." Thomas did not move, but he admired the effort the little girl was making. She reminded him of his younger sister, who used to try copying everything he did when they were children. The memory warmed him, and even though he could not smile or nod, a small kindness stirred within him. Emily looked back up at him again. Her big eyes searched his face for any sign that he knew she was trying her best. She did not want applause or praise, she simply wanted to feel strong, just for a moment. She wanted to stand like the hero in front of her. Her crown slipped forward this time, falling right over her eyes. She reached up to push it back, making the nearby visitors chuckle quietly. Emily let out a tiny, frustrated sigh, then burst into a shy giggle. The sound was so pure that even Thomas, who had trained himself to never break focus, felt his heart soften a little more. Her father gently lifted the crown and straightened it again. "There you go," he said. "Perfect fit for a brave girl." Emily took another breath, stood up straighter, and tried to hold her posture again. She wanted to show the guard that she could be strong too. Thomas watched her with a quiet, hidden admiration. He saw her trembling a little, not out of fear, but out of determination. He recognized that kind of strength. It was the soft, quiet strength of someone who kept trying, even when things felt overwhelming. Visitors around them continued watching the scene with warm expressions. Some whispered to each other about how adorable the little girl looked in her toy crown. Others simply stood there, touched by the innocence of the moment. Emily finally whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear, "I hope he thinks I'm brave." Her parents both smiled softly. They did not need to hear Thomas speak to know the truth. His gentle stillness, his careful attention, and the soft focus in his eyes said enough. He did think she was brave, even if he could not show it openly. Emily gazed up at him one last time, her eyes shining with admiration. And though Thomas remained perfectly still, something small had already happened. A connection formed quietly, without words, without movement, just through shared presence. She had no idea that this simple moment, her little attempt to stand strong in front of him, would lead to something much more touching in the minutes to come. For now, she simply took comfort in standing near someone who looked unbreakable. And Thomas, behind his silent posture, felt a gentle shift in his heart, one that he would remember long after his shift was over. Emily stood in front of Thomas with her tiny shoulders pulled back and her chin slightly raised, trying her best to copy his posture. For a moment, the crowd around them grew quiet, as if everyone felt something gentle forming in the air. The palace grounds were usually filled with people taking photos or chatting loudly, but now their attention shifted to this small girl in a toy crown and the tall guard standing before her. Thomas remained perfectly still on the outside, but inside he felt something warm growing. He could sense how determined Emily was, even though she was shaking a little from both excitement and nervousness. Children often looked at him with curiosity, but this little girl looked at him with something deeper: hope, admiration, and a desire to feel strong again. Her presence touched him more than he expected. Emily's crown slipped sideways again, and her father fixed it softly. She took a deep breath and raised her head a little higher, trying once more to match Thomas's seriousness. She placed her feet slightly apart, copying what she thought a royal guard stance should look like. Her elbows were stiff at her sides, and she blinked hard, trying not to move. Her lips pressed together in a tiny line as she concentrated. People around them smiled quietly, admiring her effort. Some visitors lifted their phones, but they held them carefully, respectful of the moment. A few whispered among themselves about how adorable it was, but their voices were soft, like they didn't want to disturb the sweetness happening in front of them. Thomas watched her with careful attention. Although he could not speak or move, He felt the need to help her, even in the smallest way. He wanted her to feel brave and confident. He wished he could smile at her, or kneel down to tell her she was doing amazingly. But the rules of his role were strict. He could not talk, nod, or break formation unless it was required. Still, within those rules, there were small gestures he could make. Very small ones. Gentle ones that did not break any regulations but still carried meaning. He had learned over the years that kindness did not always require big actions. Sometimes, the smallest, softest gesture could touch a person's heart more deeply than words. Emily kept standing still, but she wobbled a little again. Her legs were not strong enough to stay firm for long, and she looked at Thomas with a mixture of frustration and longing. She wanted to show him she was strong, just like he was. But her body didn't always listen to her. Thomas decided to help her in a way that only she would notice. It had to be something subtle, something gentle, something within the rules. He slowly tapped his boot once against the ground. It was a tiny movement so small that most people would not even catch it. His posture stayed straight, his face serious, his hands steady. But that soft tap was different from his usual stillness. The sound was faint but clear enough for someone paying close attention. Emily's eyes widened. She looked down at his boot, then back up at his face. Her parents exchanged surprised glances. They knew enough about royal guards to understand that even the smallest movement was unusual. But Thomas wasn't breaking the rules. Guards were allowed to adjust their footing when needed, and many people assumed that was all he was doing. But for Emily, the movement felt like something special, something just for her. She took another deep breath and straightened her stance again. Thomas tapped his boot a second time, ever so softly, like he was giving her a tiny rhythm to follow. Not a command, not an instruction, just a gentle encouragement. A silent, unspoken message. "You're doing great. Keep going. I see you." Emily tried to mirror him. She placed her feet carefully, adjusting her stance to mimic the rhythm she thought he meant. Her parents watched with emotional eyes, the moment touching them more than they expected. Strangers nearby felt their hearts warm too. It was rare to see a guard interact, even in the smallest ways, and the sincerity of it made the scene even more special. A soft breeze moved through the palace courtyard. Emily's toy crown shimmered as the sunlight hit it. The breeze also made her hair tickle her cheeks, but she ignored the urge to brush it away. She wanted to stay focused. She blinked a few times, then tightened her lips again, trying hard not to smile, even though excitement bubbled inside her. Her mother whispered, "You're doing so well, sweetheart." Emily whispered back, "He's helping me." Thomas heard her tiny voice. Though he didn't show it outwardly, her words touched him deeply. He had seen many visitors, thousands of faces over the years, but few moments had ever made him feel the way this one did. He watched her wobble again, and for a brief moment, her eyes lowered as if she doubted herself. Thomas gently tapped his boot once more. Emily looked up instantly, her face brightening with renewed determination. Her feet planted firmly on the ground again. She straightened her spine. She raised her chin just a little higher. She wasn't afraid anymore. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath. People felt something pure happening, something unplanned and sincere. A simple, silent connection between a child and a man dedicated to his duty. Emily tried to stand completely still like Thomas, but her small body couldn't stay frozen for more than a few seconds. Still, she tried with all her heart, and that effort alone made the moment feel magical. Her father leaned down and whispered, "He's encouraging you. Keep going." Her eyes sparkled with pride. A family nearby wiped their eyes quietly. Another person covered her mouth with her hand, touched by the tenderness of the moment. A few tourists shared small smiles with each other, united by the sweetness they were witnessing. Emily wanted to do something for the guard in return. She didn't know what, but she wanted him to know she appreciated his kindness. Very slowly, she lifted 2 fingers to her forehead and made a small, respectful salute, something she had seen on television. Her mother gasped softly, surprised by her courage. Her father smiled, his eyes misty. Thomas saw the tiny salute. His posture did not change, but inside, his heart felt a soft ache, a gentle, warm feeling he had not felt in a long time. He admired the little girl's sincerity and her effort to be respectful. He could not salute back. He could not break his form, but he wanted to give her something meaningful, something only she would notice, something within the rules. So he did something incredibly small, something only the closest observers might catch. He shifted his focus. His eyes, which had been staring straight ahead, flicked downward for a fraction of a second, just enough to meet Emily's gaze before returning forward. It was so quick that most people would never notice it. But Emily noticed. Her face lit up instantly. Her smile spread slowly but beautifully, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Her parents felt their hearts swell as they watched her joy return pure, bright, and healing. She whispered softly, barely louder than a breath. "He saw me." The moment felt almost magical. A guard who stood still like a statue had found a way to silently connect with a child who needed encouragement. To strangers, it was a tiny gesture. To Emily, it was everything. It made her feel brave. It made her feel seen. Thomas remained still, but warmth filled his chest. In that brief exchange, he felt as if he had given something meaningful, something that went beyond duty. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. Emily stepped back slowly, still smiling, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She did not know that many people around her were quietly tearing up. She only knew that the royal guard she admired had shown her kindness without saying a single word. She thought the moment was complete, but something even more touching was still coming. Emily's little smile still lingered as she stepped back, holding her mother's hand. Her heart felt warm, lighter than it had been in weeks. The soft tap of Thomas's boot, and the brief moment their eyes met, stayed shining inside her like a little light. She felt proud, truly proud, for the first time in a long while. Her parents thought this would be the end of the moment, and they were already grateful for what had happened. They could not have imagined anything more. But the day still had something special waiting quietly. Emily looked up at Thomas one more time, just to see if he was still watching her. Of course, his face was as still and serious as before. His posture had not changed at all. But strangely, Emily felt that his kindness was still present, like a warm glow hiding behind a silent mask. Her mother gave her hand a small squeeze. "You did so well," she whispered. "I'm very proud of you." Emily nodded softly, her smile making her toy crown tilt again. She didn't fix it this time. She liked the way it leaned a little. It made the moment feel even more like her own. Her father looked at Thomas with respect. He knew how rare it was for a guard to make even the smallest gesture. What Thomas had done meant more than anyone around could fully understand. The family began stepping away, ready to let the moment settle into memory. But before they could take more than a few steps, Emily hesitated. She looked back at Thomas, her small eyebrows lifting in thought. Something gentle in her heart urged her not to leave just yet. She tugged lightly on her father's sleeve. "Can I say goodbye?" she whispered. Her father knelt beside her, surprised but touched. "Of course you can. You can say anything you like." He may not answer, but he will hear you. Emily nodded, her toy crown shimmering with each tiny movement. She let go of her father's hand and stepped forward again, approaching Thomas with more confidence than before. Visitors around them paused once more, sensing something meaningful about to happen. Emily took one careful step, then another. Her small shoes tapped lightly on the stone path. She stopped a respectful distance from Thomas and looked up at him with her bright, hopeful eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice clear but gentle. The crowd around them went silent. It wasn't a loud thank you. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, honest, and full of pure emotion. Her parents watched, their hearts almost aching with tenderness. Thomas heard every word. He wanted, more than anything, to speak. He wanted to tell her she was brave. He wanted to tell her that her strength reminded him of someone he had loved dearly. He wanted to let her know that she had touched his heart in a way he would never forget. But he couldn't speak. He couldn't smile. Yet he could still do something very small, but powerful. His head moved. Not much, just the slightest tilt. A tiny movement, barely visible unless someone was really looking. It was so subtle that it could easily be mistaken for a natural shift or a small adjustment. But the timing of it, the gentleness of it, the very intention behind it. Emily saw it instantly. Her breath caught in her chest. Her eyes widened as her tiny hands curled up near her heart, touched by the acknowledgement. She felt it deep inside that the guard meant it for her. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a routine adjustment. It was a quiet answer. He heard her. He understood. And he appreciated her. Her mother gasped softly and covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes almost immediately. Her father turned his head away for a moment, blinking back the emotion that hit him so suddenly and so strongly. The visitors nearby felt the moment too. They had been watching everything. From the start, her approach, her attempt to copy his stance, his silent encouragement, her whispered gratitude. And now this tiny, human gesture from a guard known for strict stillness made their hearts swell. A woman standing close wiped a tear from her cheek. A couple holding hands looked at each other lovingly. A few tourists pressed their lips together, trying not to cry. Even some people who had only arrived recently felt the emotion hanging in the air like a soft blanket. It was such a small gesture, but it carried so much meaning. Emily's smile spread slowly, gently, beautifully across her face. It wasn't the excited smile she had before. This one was deeper, full of comfort and joy. It was the kind of smile that stays in a person's memory forever. "Bye," she whispered sweetly. She stepped back to her parents, her expression glowing like sunlight. Her mother knelt down and pulled her into a careful hug. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That was so special. 3. CV known. 3 meter. 3. Emily hugged her back, her small arms wrapping around her mother's neck. Her father placed his hand on her back, gently brushing her hair. He didn't speak for a moment, afraid his voice might crack if he tried. Instead, he pressed his forehead lightly against her toy crown. The crowd slowly returned to life after a long breath of silence. But several people were still wiping tears from their eyes. They knew they had witnessed something rare, a moment of connection that did not need words, only kindness. Thomas remained at his post. But something had changed in him too. His face still looked firm, but warmth filled him from within. Emily's gentle thank you touched him in a way he hadn't expected. Many visitors had spoken to him over the years, but very few had spoken with such honesty, such softness. He felt as though a memory, long tucked away in a quiet corner of his heart, had been awakened. The memory of his younger sister, who used to stand in front of him just like Emily, copying his stance and laughing when she couldn't stay still. His sister had always told him he was strong, even when he didn't believe it. Emily, in her own small way, had reminded him of that truth again. As Emily and her parents began walking away, Thomas watched them from the edge of his vision. He couldn't turn his head fully, but he followed them with the quiet awareness of someone who cared. The little crown on Emily's head shimmered with each of her steps. Before they disappeared into the crowd, Emily looked back one last time. And even though Thomas did not move or change his posture again, she smiled as if she felt his presence comforting her from afar. For the rest of the day, visitors continued to come and go. taking pictures, and admiring the guards. But many who had witnessed the moment carried the sweetness of it in their hearts. Some whispered about it to friends, others simply savored the feeling quietly. It became a memory that they would share long after leaving the palace, a whisper of kindness in a world that sometimes felt too busy to notice small wonders. And for Thomas, the moment brought him something he hadn't felt in a while, a gentle reminder that even in silence, even in stillness, it was possible to touch someone's heart, and perhaps even heal a part of his own. The palace grounds slowly returned to their usual rhythm, with visitors coming and going, taking photos, laughing, and admiring the grand building. But even as everything around him looked normal again, Thomas felt a soft glow inside him that refused to fade. The moment with Emily stayed warm in his thoughts, like a gentle light he carried quietly behind his still expression. He continued to stand at his post, firm and steady, just as he had been trained. His posture didn't change. His face stayed serious. His body remained still. But inside, his heart felt different, fuller, lighter, calmer. Even the way he breathed seemed softer now, as if the world itself had become a little kinder in that one small moment. Emily and her parents disappeared into the large crowd, their figures growing smaller until they were gone completely. But to Thomas, it felt as though a part of them lingered, a sweet memory resting softly in the air around him. He watched the people around him with a new sense of awareness. He noticed a group of friends laughing together. He noticed a couple holding hands. He noticed a father lifting his son onto his shoulders so the child could see above the crowd. These scenes were familiar, but now they felt richer, more meaningful, as if Emily's kindness had helped him see the world with clearer eyes. For a long time, Thomas had believed that his duty required him to be completely separate from the emotional world around him. He stood still, silent, professional. People saw him as strong, serious, and unshakable. They respected him for it, admired him for it, and took countless photos that captured only the surface of who he was. But Emily had seen something else, something he didn't even expect to show. She had seen his heart. It surprised him how much that meant to him. As the hours passed, Thomas thought about the little girl in the toy crown, her determination, her tiny salute, her soft, "Thank you," and the way her smile had grown when he tilted his head ever so slightly, just to acknowledge her courage. He was not supposed to react to visitors, but he also knew that being human didn't make him any less of a guard. It made him better, stronger, more understanding. He realized that kindness didn't break the role he played, it added meaning to it. When his shift finally ended, Thomas marched away from his post with the same steady steps he always used. But this time, something felt different in the rhythm of his walk. His boots tapped the ground in a way that felt lighter, more peaceful. He reached the quiet area where the guards rested. The noise of the crowd faded behind him, replaced by the soft sounds of footsteps and distant conversations. He removed his tall hat carefully, letting the cool air touch his forehead. He took a slow breath, thinking again about the little girl who stood bravely in front of him. One of the younger guards, who had been stationed nearby, approached him. "There was a little girl in a crown watching you for a long time, wasn't there?" he asked with a small smile. Thomas nodded slightly. "Yes. She looked like she admired you a lot," the younger guard said. "It was a sweet moment." Thomas simply replied, "She was very brave." The younger guard didn't ask for more. He understood that some moments didn't need further explanation. Instead, he placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder before moving on. The simple gesture made Thomas appreciate the people he worked with even more. After resting for a while, Thomas walked through the quiet hallway that led to the exit reserved for guards. The walls along the corridor displayed framed photographs of historical ceremonies and former guards who had served long before him. Each picture showed the same posture, the same uniform, the same proud stance. As Thomas walked past them, he reflected on his role again. He wasn't just standing outside a palace. He wasn't just guarding something important. He was part of a tradition, one that stretched back through generations. a tradition built on discipline, honor, and presence. But more than that, he realized something else that day. He was also a symbol, one that meant different things to different people. To some, he was a piece of history. To others, a protector. To children like Emily, he was a figure of courage. Someone who stood calm and strong even when the world felt overwhelming. The thought made his heart swell softly. When Thomas stepped outside into the quieter part of the palace grounds, he paused for a moment, letting the cool afternoon breeze wash over him. He thought about Emily again, wondering where she was now. Maybe she was holding her parents' hands as they walked down the long roads of London. Maybe she was telling them all about how she stood like a royal guard. Maybe she was touching her toy crown gently, feeling proud of the bravery she had shown. He hoped she felt stronger than before. He hoped that her fear of the world felt smaller now. He hoped she would carry that moment with her, the same way he carried it inside him. And then, standing there in the quiet space, Thomas felt a familiar ache, a gentle, bittersweet reminder of his past. He thought of his younger sister. He remembered how she used to run around, laughing, wearing a paper crown she had made herself. She would call him her brave knight. Even when he felt anything but brave, she would ask him to stand still like a soldier. And she would try to copy him, wobbling and giggling, just like Emily did. Those memories had faded into the background of his busy life, but today, they felt alive again, bright, warm, and full of love. Thomas closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the memory settle in his heart. Perhaps that was why the moment with Emily had touched him so deeply. She reminded him of the softness he once knew, the innocence, the admiration, the belief that being strong didn't mean being emotionless. It meant being steady for others, even in silence. When he opened his eyes again, the sunlight had shifted, casting a golden glow across the palace walls. He felt a sense of calm wash over him, the kind that only comes when a person understands something important about themselves. He walked toward the exit gate and stepped into the quieter streets, blending into the flow of people who didn't know who he was behind the uniform. But Thomas didn't mind. He didn't need recognition. The moment he shared that day was enough, more than enough. As he made his way home, he carried the warm memory like a soft flame inside him. He knew he would return to his post the next day, standing tall and silent, like always. But now he understood something new about his role. Even in silence, he could help someone. Even in stillness, he could offer comfort. Even in the smallest moments, he could make a difference. Emily had reminded him of that truth. And somewhere in the city, a little girl with a toy crown was probably thinking the same thing, that kindness, even silent kindness, had the power to make a person feel brave again. Thomas smiled inwardly at the thought. He would stand at his post again, day after day, with renewed purpose. Not just as a guard protecting a palace, but as a quiet symbol of strength for anyone who needed it, especially the little ones who looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. The day had started like any other, but it ended with a memory he would carry for the rest of his life. A simple moment, a soft smile, a brave little girl, and a guard who realized that even the stillest hearts could shine.